You're sitting on your couch, mid-conversation with your friend about something completely random. Suddenly, your smart speaker lights up and Alexa chimes in like she was invited to the chat. Except you didn't say Alexa. You didn't say, "Hey Google." You didn't say anything even remotely close. But there she is, glowing blue, ready to help with absolutely nothing you asked for. Ever wonder why your voice assistant keeps waking up when you're definitely not talking to it? And what actually happens to those recordings it shouldn't have made? Today, I'll explain why voice assistants activate randomly like you're 5 years old. By the end, you'll understand whether your smart speaker is actually spying on you or if it's just spectacularly bad at its one job. Here's the thing about how these devices actually work. Your voice assistant isn't actually listening to everything you say. Not really, despite what it might feel like. Think of it like having a friend who's wearing noise-canceling headphones, but taking them off every few seconds to check if you said their name. That's basically what Alexa, Google, or Siri is doing. The device is running a tiny, low-power chip that's only programmed to recognize one thing, its wake word. Alexa, hey Google, hey Siri. It's not recording your rant about your upstairs neighbor. It's just sitting there, half listening, waiting for that one specific sound pattern. The problem is, that particular chip isn't exactly a genius at its job. It's more like that coworker who thinks every email is urgent and replies all to everything. It hears something that sounds close enough, decides it's probably the wake word, and boom, now it's actually listening. So what triggers a false wake? Basically anything that sounds even slightly like the wake word. Someone says, a letter, and Alexa thinks you're calling her name. You're watching TV, and a character says, okay, cool, and Google Assistant pops up. Studies have found these devices activate from words like election and unbelievable. They also wake up to Kevin and even cocaine, which is pretty wild. Which means if you're watching any documentary about politics or crime, your smart speaker is probably waking up constantly. It's not a conspiracy. Just pattern recognition gone wrong. It's just a computer trying to recognize patterns in human speech, which is messy and full of accents, mumbling, and background noise. The wake word detection runs locally using a limited algorithm. It's trying to match sound waves, not understand context. So when it hears something close, it makes a guess. And sometimes it guesses wrong. Now here's where it gets interesting and a bit creepy. The moment your device thinks it heard the wake word, even if it didn't, it stops being passive. It wakes up fully, connects to the internet, and starts streaming everything to the company's servers in the cloud. That's where the real processing happens, with powerful computers. That's where your voice gets transcribed, analyzed, and turned into a command. The device itself is too small and cheap to handle complex voice recognition, so it outsources the hard part, which means every false wake sends whatever you said in the next few seconds to Amazon, Google, or Apple's servers. And yes, it gets stored in your account's voice history, fully timestamped and transcribed, sitting there like a weird diary you never meant to write. Here's the part that makes people really uncomfortable. Those recordings don't just disappear into the void. Companies use them to improve their voice recognition systems. And sometimes, that means actual human beings listen to them, not robots or AI. Real people, sitting in an office, playing back random snippets to check if the transcription was accurate. In 2019, multiple reports revealed something shocking about the major companies. Contractors for Amazon, Google, and Apple were reviewing thousands of voice recordings, including ones clearly captured by mistake. People having private conversations, arguments, and bedroom activities that definitely weren't meant for an audience. These weren't hackers. These were employees doing quality control. The companies claimed they anonymized the data, but voices are identifying. Background details are highly identifying too. That weird phrase you say that nobody else says? That's super identifying information. It's like saying, don't worry, we blurred your face, when you're still wearing your custom jacket in your kitchen that you post on Instagram every morning. This matters because we all just hit agree without reading the terms and conditions. We set up the device and assumed it would only activate when we wanted it to. But the default settings are designed for the company's benefit, not yours. By default, your voice recordings are stored indefinitely. By default, you're opted into helping improve the service, which includes human review. By default, there's no auto-delete. It's like signing up for a free trial that automatically renews because you forgot to cancel. Except in this case, the charge is your privacy. But here's what you can actually do about it. Every major voice assistant platform has settings you've probably never looked at. You can view your entire voice history, every recording, every false wake, every time you asked it to play Wonderwall at 1 a.m. You can delete individual recordings or wipe everything at once. You can set up auto-delete so recordings disappear after 3 months instead of living forever in the cloud. And most importantly, you can opt out of human review. That setting exists. It's just buried 6 menus deep because they're not exactly excited about you finding it. For Alexa, go into the app, hit Settings, then Alexa Privacy, then Manage your Alexa data. For Google, it's under Activity Controls in your account settings. For Siri, it's in iPhone settings under Siri and Search. It takes maybe 5 minutes total, and suddenly, you're not passively feeding data into a system you didn't fully understand. Now let's talk about whether this is actually spying. Technically, no. These devices aren't constantly streaming everything to the cloud. That would destroy your internet bandwidth and be pretty easy to detect. Security researchers have tested this. The devices really do process the wake word locally and only send data after activation. But functionally, it feels like spying when you find recordings of conversations you never intended to share. It feels like surveillance when you realize strangers might have heard an argument because your TV said something that sounded like, "Okay, Google." The intent might not be malicious, but the impact is the same. You lost control of information you thought was private, and you didn't even know it happened. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The technology itself isn't the only issue. It's also how companies handle the data afterward. When a false wake happens, that recording gets added to your profile. It's analyzed for patterns. It's used to build a more detailed understanding of your household, your habits, your speech patterns. The assistant isn't just learning to recognize your voice better. It's learning about you. And all of that happens in the background, triggered by false wakes you didn't authorize and might never know about unless you specifically go looking. Some people are opting out entirely. They're unplugging the smart speakers and going back to regular Bluetooth speakers and light switches that require actually walking over and flipping them. Others are getting strategic, placing devices only in common areas, not bedrooms or bathrooms, muting them during sensitive conversations, treating them less like helpful robot butlers and more like that friend who's great at picking music but absolutely cannot keep a secret. That's probably the healthiest way to think about them. They're useful, they're convenient. They make it easy to set timers, play music, and check the weather without getting up. But they're not magic. They're not perfect, and they're definitely not designed with your privacy as the top priority. Here's the reality check. False wake detection isn't going away. The technology is improving, but it's never going to be flawless as long as it's listening for one specific phrase in an ocean of human speech, TV dialogue, music lyrics, and household chaos. The only way to completely eliminate false wakes is to not have a device that's always listening for a wake word. Everything else is just degrees of acceptable risk. It's like using social media. You know they're collecting data. You know the algorithm is watching what you click, but you've decided the trade-off is worth it. Voice assistants are the same calculation. Convenience versus privacy. Just make sure you're making that choice on purpose, not by default. To recap, your voice assistant is always listening, but only for its wake word. Everything else is processed locally until it thinks you said the magic phrase. False wakes happen constantly because the detection system isn't perfect, and words like election or even Kevin can trigger it by accident. When that happens, the recording gets sent to the cloud, stored in your voice history, and sometimes reviewed by actual humans. The default settings are designed to benefit the company, not protect your privacy. But you can change them if you dig through the menus. So here's my question for you. Knowing what happens during false wakes and who might listen to those recordings, are you comfortable with your current setup? Or is it time to dig into those privacy settings you've been ignoring?